Welcome back, everyone. Today I'll be doing a painting of a Pukwudgie. So if you haven't watched this before, I paint in VR while talking about legends, cryptids, creepy stuff. And they are supposed true stories. You can decide whether you think they're real or not. I'm just gonna read them and paint. So today, I'll be doing a painting of a Pukwudgie. In case you don't know what Pukwudgies are, they are small humanoid creatures steeped in Native American folklore. Pukwudgies are said to stand between a few inches up to 3 feet tall, with grayish, greenish, or sometimes translucent skin that helps them blend into their surroundings. They're often depicted with large noses, sharp ears, and sometimes glowing eyes. In some tales, they can shapeshift or even become invisible. They can be described as more goblin-like or sometimes more human-looking. There's a lot of different variations. They're usually lumped in with fae folk, fairies, and things like that. Some people describe them as goblin or gnome looking. Depends on where you are and everything like that. So as far as their habitat, Pukwudgies are often seen in dense forests and wooded areas, particularly in the northeastern United States. They are commonly tied to specific regions known for thick woodlands, such as the Hockomock Swamp in Massachusetts, which is part of the Bridgewater Triangle. Bridgewater Triangle is known for paranormal activity. They're also found in stories from the Great Lakes area around New England, though similar creatures appear in other Native American legends across North America. They prefer secluded dark areas with plenty of natural cover, such as bracken ferns, undergrowth, and swamps, which allow them to stay hidden from humans as they roam. So, legends of Pukwudgies date back centuries and often come with warnings. While they might play harmless pranks, they're also known to be mischievous, and in some stories, even malevolent. There are similar creatures seen around the world, and there are a lot of creatures. I'm just going to name a few. Few examples are the Duwindi in the Philippines, the Menehune in Hawaii, and the Brownies in Scotland. And there's a lot more. There are so many different names that the natives have for these creatures. Also a ton of different spelling variations depending on the tribe. So for these stories, I'm just going to call them, these creatures for the most part, Pukwudgies. Or little people, they're often called, depending on the story, but mostly Pukwudgies. So, for several months, a man named J.C. Johnson, the founder of Crypto Four Corners International and he's also a cryptid researcher, has been investigating a series of reported encounters with cryptids and unexplained phenomenon in northern Minnesota. He's close to the Canadian border. Among the creatures he's exploring is a race of small humanoid beings that the local natives call the wild man or little people. Descriptions of these creatures portray them as being around 2 to 3 feet tall with a greenish hue. So their skin is usually a greenish hue, likely due to their heavy plant-based diet, high in chlorophyll, These small beings inhabit dense bracken fern canopies, which grow up to 3 feet tall, allowing them to move undetected through the forest's underbrush. Many legends warn that if one encounters one of these creatures, it is best to avoid interaction and quietly leave the area. Some stories even suggest that these creatures are capable of abducting humans. In Massachusetts, sightings of similar beings known as Pukwudgies have been reported, with some incidents attributed to disappearances and strange occurrences in Hockomock Swamp, an area considered cursed by local indigenous tribes. William Russo recounted his encounter with a 3 to 4 foot creature in his book, The Creature from the Bridgewater Triangle, and other odd tales from New England. While walking his dog near midnight, close to Hockomock Swamp, Russo saw the creature under a streetlight, attempting to speak, and gestured for him to come closer. This experience with what he later learned to be a Pukwudgie was a significant moment, which he shared in interviews and his writings. During their investigations, researcher Ron Shaw interviewed an Ojibwe woman whose son had seen a little person playing a flute. Another Ojibwe man reported that while hunting, his son became separated and was later found stuck in a tree root, claiming that the creature had captured him and tried to take him underground. One documented disappearance in the Missing 411 series by David Paulides involved 39-year-old Corey Kelly. He went missing in the Red Lake Wildlife Management Area in Minnesota during a grouse hunting trip. Despite a large-scale search involving hundreds of volunteers and the Canadian Air Force, Kelly's body was not discovered until the following spring. A tragic case that brought together local and international search efforts. Some Ojibwe in the area believe that the Pukwudgies may have been involved in Kelly's disappearance. So I have a few more stories from Massachusetts and the Bridgewater Triangle area. So, in case you don't know about the Bridgewater Triangle, it's a sort of a triangular area in Massachusetts where lots of weird things happen. It's located in the southeastern area of Massachusetts and spans about 200 square miles. The region includes the towns of Abington, Rehoboth, and Freetown as its approximate boundaries, forming a triangle. Other towns within the triangle include Bridgewater, Taunton, Brockton, and Rainham. A woman named Sue shares her possible Pukwudgie encounter. When Sue was about 14 or 15, she had an experience she would never forget. Early one morning, she lay tossing and turning in bed, half awake. As she rolled over, she opened her eyes briefly and saw something unusual. A small, gnome-like figure sitting on her shelf, faintly illuminated by the bluish morning light streaming through the window. The creature was only about a foot tall, with a grayish-brown complexion and a simple tunic. It sat cross-legged, right hand on its left knee, and looked a bit like an elf, though this was before she'd seen anything similar in movies. To her surprise, the little figure grinned broadly, waving at her with a big toothy smile, almost as if it was delighted to see her. She didn't feel any fear or negative energy from it, just a sense of friendliness. Half asleep, she accepted its presence, but once fully awake, she felt a little uneasy, questioning whether she'd really seen it or if it had been a vivid dream. Sue lived in New England, close to the Bridgewater Triangle, where local folklore included stories of Pukwudgies. Turns out her father was a collector of Native American artifacts, such as pottery and arrowheads, so she wondered if what she saw might have been a forest spirit simply stopping by. So this is one of the few stories where one of these things is seen inside someone's house. Most of the time they're seen in the woods. This next story happened in Sandwich, Massachusetts. A lady named Mary had an encounter in 2001, in late spring, in Sandwich, Massachusetts. She was walking her dog Layla early one morning between 4 and 5 a.m. She described seeing a small troll-like creature peeking out from a bush. It was about a foot tall, with a round humanoid face, grayish skin, and had black tangled hair. Its eyes had a yellow shine. She stopped walking and just stared at the creature. It stared back at her for a few seconds before taking off into the woods. The creature reportedly smiled at her before vanishing into the woods. She shared the sighting with her friend, who suggested that it might have been a Pukwudgie. Another woman from Massachusetts encountered a persistent Pukwudgie that appeared near her home on multiple occasions. The encounters took place over several weeks, during the warmer months. Initially, she saw the creature in the woods while walking her dog. She describes it as small, standing about 2 feet tall, with smooth grayish skin that seemed to reflect or blend into the shadows of the woods. Its appearance was distinctly human-like, but distorted with exaggerated features, such as a pot-belly, large gleaming eyes that had a mischievous or sinister glint. The creature's movements were agile and eerily quiet as she watched it disappear into the brush. Then it began appearing near her home. She would see it in her yard. It seemed to take pleasure in vanishing suddenly, demonstrating a supernatural speed or ability to become almost invisible in the dense forest undergrowth. She said that late at night she would hear tapping on her bedroom window, but whenever she attempted to catch sight of the creature, it would vanish into the darkness. The ongoing incidents created a sense of unease and dread. Eventually, she decided to move away, and only then did the disturbances stop. Next story, Wallington Park, Nottingham. In late October 1979, a truly strange incident occurred in Wallington Park, Nottingham, England. This incident has captivated enthusiasts of the paranormal ever since. So this is a weird one. A group of 10 children, aged 8 to 10, were playing in the park as dusk settled over the landscape. The children, who were familiar with the park grounds, ventured near a swampy, fenced-off area. Suddenly, they spotted something entirely out of place. A crowd of about 60 tiny figures, each standing only half as tall as the children themselves. The children described the figures as resembling gnomes, with wrinkled faces, long white beards, tipped in red, and wearing bright blue tops, yellow tights, and naughty-style nightcaps, with a bauble on top. These miniature beings weren't walking, they were driving around in small bubble-like cars. Each car held 2 gnomes, and there were about 30 cars in total. The strange vehicles, although silent, could zip around quickly, navigating the swampy terrain with ease, even jumping over logs and other obstacles. For roughly 15 minutes, the children watched as the gnomes drove around and even beckoned the kids closer, as though inviting them to join in. Some of these gnomes were also seen climbing onto trees and disappearing into small holes. The children reported that the gnomes seemed playful, even laughing in a strange high-pitched manner. Despite the fantastical nature of their story, the children insisted it was real, even as skeptical parents and adults dismissed it as make-believe. The following day, their headmaster took their story seriously enough to interview each child separately. While there were some minor differences, the children's accounts remained consistent, especially their descriptions of the gnome's appearance and the peculiar bubble cars. When the news of the sighting spread, additional witnesses came forward. Local residents claimed to have seen similar small figures over the years, particularly near the park's lake area. Marjorie Johnson, a former secretary of the Nottingham-based Fairy Investigation Society, confirmed that she had previously received reports of little people sightings in Wollaton Park. So the Wollaton Park gnome sighting is a prominent case in English folklore. Most people are skeptical because it sounds silly, but apparently a lot of people claim to have seen little gnomes driving around in bubble cars. So that's a very interesting story. It does sound a little far-fetched, but who knows? So the next story is another kind of famous one, the Ilkley Moor incident. So the story of Philip Spencer's encounter with a small green-skinned humanoid on Ilkley Moor is one of the most famous and debated sightings of a supposed little person or possibly alien. But I'm going to include this story because some think it could be what he saw may have been like a Pukwudgie or a little person. So Spencer was a former policeman, and he was hiking on a foggy, mist-covered moor in Yorkshire, England, on December 1st, 1987. He had brought his camera with him, hoping to capture mysterious lights that were often reported in the area. During his walk, he noticed a human-like figure roughly 4 feet tall, with green skin and large eyes. Surprised, he quickly snapped a photograph which captured the small figure before it quickly ran out of sight. The resulting photo was blurry but shows what looks like a humanoid figure with distinct features. Spencer claimed he tried to chase the figure but lost it near a small dome-shaped craft, which then lifted off and disappeared into the sky. He continued his journey, but upon arriving at his destination, he noticed that he seemed to have lost an hour of time, as if something unaccounted for had happened during his sighting. Intrigued by this missing time, Spencer later underwent hypnotic regression, where he recalled being abducted and encountering the creature he had photographed. The photograph sparked immense scrutiny, with some researchers analyzing it for signs of tampering. A wildlife expert initially examined the image and noted that the figure didn't resemble any known animal, while an analysis by Kodak suggested the photo had not been altered. Later, a U.S. Navy photography expert found the image inconclusive due to its blurry quality, keeping the mystery alive. Spencer's story has continued to intrigue UFO and paranormal researchers, and many see it as potential evidence as an otherworldly encounter, whether it be a fairy-like being or an alien, or something else entirely. So the next story happened in western Pennsylvania. A woman had a strange sighting at her cabin in western Pennsylvania. This lady shared that she owns a cabin in the mountains of western Pennsylvania, where she spends her summers. For almost 20 years, she has kept a game camera set up in the surrounding woods to capture images of the local wildlife. 3 weeks ago, after checking her camera, she discovered a series of 3 consecutive images, each taken 1 second apart, capturing a creature unlike any that she had seen before. Her camera, which detects both heat and motion, indicated that it was not simply a leaf, weed, or plant, The creature gave off heat and was in motion. Since the sighting, she has left the camera in the same spot, hoping to capture more images. Though nothing further has appeared, she and her father also took comparison photographs to determine the creature's height, estimating to be about 44 inches tall, based on the images. She described the figure as resembling a gnome, troll, or possibly even a brownie. When I found the story, I did not see any photographs with it, so it's just her talking about the photograph. So I don't know. I don't know why she wouldn't put the photograph up, but I couldn't find it. A woman named Tara shares a story that happened to her in 1991 when she was about 13. She says that she lives in the Northeast, and that's all she'll give as far as information on where she lives. She says she saw something she could only describe as a fairy, elf, or a creature of that sort. She, her mother, and a friend were house-sitting a beautiful condo nestled in a forest that felt undeniably magical. She said it's as though the place held its own energy. One morning during breakfast, she glimpsed a small figure about the size of a 6-year-old child. She says one morning during breakfast, she saw a small figure about the size of a 2-year-old child dashing across the field next to the house. It vanished behind a tree too slim to truly hide. Her mother and friend sat opposite her and missed the sight. When she mentioned it to her mother replied, "I think I saw that too, a few days ago." At her friend's suggestion, she and her mother went to another room and separately sketched out what they had seen, without revealing any details to each other. When they compared drawings, they were startled to find they'd both drawn the same figure, a small human-like creature with adult proportions, dressed in all-white clothing that resembled pajamas. The one she saw had looked her way, smiling or laughing, while the mother's sighting had only shown the figure's back. It wore a long nightcap that trailed behind it and moved faster than any human of that size could possibly move. Intrigued, she called the homeowner to tell her about the spirit they spotted in the field. The homeowner, unfazed, replied, "Oh, the fairy in white. Yes, it's attached to the tree out front. The thin one. That's the wedding tree my husband and I planted when we were married." The creature hadn't admitted any negative energy. Rather, she said it felt positive, and she thought it might be a guardian of the tree. She hadn't seen it since that morning. So that's interesting that the homeowner spotted the same thing. So that's several people that saw it. The next story comes from the Pine Barrens in New Jersey. A man named Doug, an experienced hiker, recounts an unsettling experience he had while camping in the Pine Barrens. According to Doug, he had been hiking alone and decided to set up camp near a stream one evening. As night fell, he kept hearing what he thought were animal noises, a mix of rustling in the underbrush and faint, high-pitched laughter. He dismissed it as sounds of the woods. Around midnight, the sounds became more pronounced, and he noticed small shadows moving at the edge of his campsite, just out of reach of his flashlight beam. Curious and a bit unnerved, Doug shined his flashlight towards one of the figures, but it darted away too quickly for him to get a good look. After some time, he managed to catch a glimpse of one small childlike sized figure with humanoid features, wearing what appeared to be some kind of makeshift clothing made from leaves and twigs. He described the figure as having large dark eyes that glinted in the flashlight's beam, and a thin wiry frame. The little creature stared at him for a moment, then it turned and disappeared into the darkness. Over the next hour, Doug could sense that he was being watched, with multiple small shadows occasionally appearing around his camp. He felt an overwhelming sense of unease and decided to pack up and leave before dawn. Later, Doug shared his story with locals who informed him of the Pine Barrens legends of little people. While he remains unsure of what exactly he encountered, he believes that these beings were aware of him and were curious, yet cautious, staying just out of reach. Since that experience, Doug has avoided camping in the Pine Barrens at night, as he still feels haunted by the strange presence of those little people in the forest. I've been to the Pine Barrens, and it is a very creepy place, and I don't know if I would camp there. That's also where the Jersey Devil is from. So, there's that. This story comes from the state of Indiana. This documented account of a Pukwudgie sighting at Mound State Park, Indiana, comes from Jim Campbell, a former park ranger who worked in the area. Jim reported that during a patrol at dusk in the summer, he encountered small gray-skinned creatures near the ancient mounds. These beings, described as pot-bellied and around 2 feet tall, appeared to observe him from a distance, with their glowing eyes reflecting the setting sun. Campbell stated that he attempted to approach the creatures, but they would retreat, seemingly disappearing into thin air or blending into the surroundings. The incident left him unnerved and cautious around the mounds. So he was cautious when around the mounds during future patrols. So other visitors to Mound State Park often recount similar sightings around the summer months, frequently around dusk or early morning, or early evening. Witnesses report that sightings are often accompanied by strange floral scents and an unusual number of fireflies, creating an almost supernatural atmosphere. Many believe that these Pukwudgies, or little people, are linked to the mounds because the mounds have ancient significance, possibly acting as guardians or spirits of the area. This eerie setting and history contribute to the Mound State Park's reputation as one of Indiana's spookiest natural sites. Next story, Rhode Island. One notable account from Rhode Island comes from a local fisherman named Robert or Bobby Evans, who reported an unsettling encounter during his early morning fishing trip in late summer in the early 2000s. According to Evans, he was casting his line along a quiet part of the shoreline just before dawn when he noticed a small human-like figure foraging near the rocks a few yards away. This creature was about 2 feet tall, with a slender frame and pale, almost translucent skin that made it look otherworldly in the dim morning light. Its face appeared human but oddly elongated, and its eyes seemed reflective like an animal. Evans initially thought it might be a lost child or someone in costume. As he moved slightly closer to get a better look, the figure glanced at him, briefly making direct eye contact before it scurried away on all fours, disappearing into the brush and rocks along the shore. Evans described the movement as quick, almost unnatural, and has left him with an eerie feeling, sensing that he had just witnessed something he wasn't meant to see. So this area has a rich history of folklore surrounding Pukwudgies, and the Wampanoag people believe that they are spirits or protectors of the land. They are described as guardians of water sources, and Evan's experience aligns with stories of Pukwudgies watching over the Bay Area, quietly observing those who wander too close to their domain. Many other witnesses have similar encounters around the bay, and they mention feelings of being watched or sudden bouts of unease, as well as an increase in strange noises and other unexplainable phenomenon in the area. The next story comes from the Ozark Mountains in Missouri. A family went on a camping trip in the Ozark Mountains and had a strange encounter. The sighting took place in the midsummer months. As the family settled in for the evening, they began hearing rustling noises coming from the woods. The sound was subtle but persistent, as if something was circling their campsite. The mother, Mary, said the air seemed to grow thick with an unnerving energy, and even the campfire's light felt insufficient to break the darkness. The youngest child, John, who was sitting closest to the fire, spotted what he described as a little troll man. The figure stood at the edge of the light, watching them. It was about 2 feet tall, with leathery, wrinkled skin and a long nose. The child claimed that the being held a miniature wooden spear and wore tattered clothing made from what looked like natural materials, such as leaves and bark. When the adults rushed over to see, the creature had already vanished into the shadows. As the night wore on, the family noticed that small, playful pranks were being carried out. Their items from their camp were moved around or thrown into disarray. The disturbances were persistent but not aggressive, almost as if the creature was having fun at their expense. The family decided to cut their camping trip short the following morning. The next story, Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia. Tim and his wife Heather were hiking through Cape Breton in the autumn months. Cape Breton Island has beautiful scenic views and many secluded trails. The island's landscape in the fall is known for its vibrant foliage, which seemed to almost hide the unusual events that unfolded. The couple had been enjoying the crisp air and the stunning colors of the leaves when Heather felt as if someone was watching her. As she turned, she locked eyes with a small, almost ghost-like creature, partially camouflaged by the leaves. The being stood no more than 9 inches tall and had delicate elven features. Its grin was mischievous, almost taunting, and it wore a loose brown garment that blended in with the earthly surroundings. As she stepped closer to investigate, the creature let out a shrill, high-pitched laugh that seemed to echo through the woods. In a blink, the being disappeared into thin air. Asking her boyfriend if he had seen it, and Tim said he hadn't, but he did hear the shrieking sound. The next story happened in Wisconsin. The Wisconsin encounter occurred on a warm summer evening in 2019 in a rural setting surrounded by dense woods. The witness, a local resident who preferred to remain anonymous, described an unnerving experience that began while he was sitting on his back porch around dusk. He noticed movement near the tree line at the edge of his yard. Curious, he got up to investigate and was startled to see a small humanoid figure standing about 3 feet tall. The creature appeared ancient and weathered, with wrinkled earthly-colored skin and hair that resembled tangled moss or vegetation. Its eyes were deep-set, and it had an expression that seemed both annoyed and wary, as though the man's presence was an intrusion. The entity stood still for a few moments, locking eyes with the witness before vanishing in an instant, almost as if it had melded into the surrounding shadows. Shaken, the man returned to his house and could hardly sleep that night. The next morning, he discovered tiny humanoid footprints in the soil around his garden beds. The garden itself had been disturbed, with plants either uprooted or bent over. Though nothing had been taken, the footprints were unlike any animal tracks he had seen before, with a distinct human-like shape, yet they were far too small to be those of a child. We have another encounter that happened in Maine. A resident of Maine who remains anonymous reported several unusual events involving tiny beings that seemed to be spying on him from the woods near his house. He says these beings range from about a foot to 2 feet. He described them as having human-like features, brownish-gray skin, and pointed ears. They had black and brown bushy hair, and they often disturbed the property, moving garden tools and leaving tiny tracks around the yard. One particularly unsettling experience occurred late at night when the homeowner caught one of these creatures staring at him through his kitchen window. This encounter left him disturbed. We have Pukwudgies that were seen in the Florida Everglades. In the Florida Everglades, a fisherman named Mike had a chilling experience while working alone in the remote swamplands. As he checked his fishing nets during a humid evening, he noticed a small gnome-like figure appearing out of the murky shadows. The creature was around 2 feet tall, dressed in filthy mud-streaked rags that blended almost seamlessly with the swampy environment. Its skin had an unusual texture, resembling tree bark, and its eyes glowed brightly in the dim light. What made the encounter even more unsettling was the way the being communicated. He said instead of speaking, it emitted a series of chirping and clicking sounds. Mike got the impression this creature was annoyed, as if his presence had disturbed its domain. He said that he suddenly began feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, so he slowly backed away. The creature then vanished, slipping into the shadows of the dense swamp, almost melting into the wilderness. Mike said the sighting left him quite unnerved, and he chose not to return to that spot out of respect or fear for whatever that entity was. So I saved some of the weirdest and creepiest stories for last. This one is from Norway. This encounter occurred in July of 2008. During the height of summer in Norway, it was around 9:00 p.m., which, despite being late in the evening, still had some lingering light in the sky due to the longer daylight hours typical of Norway's summer months. This event took place on Norway's largest mountain plateau, which is a stunning but rugged area known for its wide open landscapes, rocky terrain, and sparse vegetation. A man named Lars, an avid hiker familiar with the area, had decided to set up camp for the night near a rocky outcrop that was a few miles from a popular trailhead. Lars described how, as twilight descended, he began hearing odd rustling sounds and low murmurs that he initially dismissed as the wind. However, as he scanned the horizon, he noticed several hunched figures moving methodically between the large boulders and rocky outcroppings. They were small, only about 2 feet tall, but they had twisted, gnarled features, skin that resembled moss-covered stone, and long, scraggly hair that trailed behind them. Overcome with a mix of curiosity and trepidation, Lars stepped closer to get a better view. That's when one of the creatures stopped, turned its head toward him, and appeared to scowl. In a sudden and hostile movement, it picked up a rock and hurled it at him. The stone missed him, but was close enough to send him stumbling backward. In that instant, all of the figures turned to face him, their eyes glinting in the fading light. Panicking, Lars grabbed his gear and ran as fast as he could back towards the trail. Even as he put distance between himself and the area, he felt an overwhelming sense of being watched. He described hearing faint laughter and footsteps echoing off the rocks behind him, but he never looked back. There are local stories about the trolls of Norway, who, according to legend, guard the land and do not take kindly to intruders. These trolls are said to be ancient protectors, blending perfectly with the rocky landscape and becoming aggressive if provoked or approached too closely. This next encounter comes from Chile. Cami from Chile tells about an incident that occurred in April 2015 during the late afternoon. The encounter took place deep within the forests of southern Chile. This area is steeped in folklore and known for being home to a variety of supernatural entities, including the infamous Trauco. Cami, a 32-year-old woman visiting family, decided to take a walk through a forested path she had traversed many times before. As she ventured deeper into the woods, the familiar path seemed to twist and change. She felt a sudden chill, and a sense of confusion overcame her, almost as if she were in a trance. As she tried to regain her bearings, she became aware of a presence nearby. Out of the mist emerged a small, elderly man. He was no more than a foot tall, with a hunched posture, a scraggly dirt-streaked beard, and facial features that appeared distorted and deformed. His clothes looked like they were made from tattered leaves and moss. He fixed his gaze on Cami with a penetrating, almost hypnotic stare, and motioned for her to follow him deeper into the woods. Fear gripped Cami, and she instinctively turned around, determined to escape. As she fled, she heard high-pitched, cackling laughter echoing all around her, seeming to come from every direction. The oppressive fog made it hard for her to find her way, and it took her several panic-stricken minutes before she stumbled out of the woods and back into a familiar road. Locals in the area tell stories of these little people, a well-known forest spirit in Chilean mythology. They are typically depicted as a small, ugly man with a deformed face who wields the power to lead travelers astray. He is also said to have a malevolent charm that can enchant or paralyze victims, especially women, leaving them in a state of confusion or trance. So these little creatures, these Pukwudgies, are pretty much seen everywhere in the world. They're kind of like Bigfoot. Bigfoot is like pretty much everywhere, but they, depending on where you are, there's different names for them, and they look a little different depending on where you see them, where they're seen. I would love to see one of these little creatures. I'm in the woods a lot, so maybe one day I'll get to see one. So, let me know what you guys think of these Pukwudgies or little people. Let me know in the comments if you think they're real, if you've heard anything about them, if you or anyone you know has seen them. I'm also going to put our email so that you can send stories if you want. and I can tell listener stories while painting. That would be a cool episode. I'll also put the email in the description of the video. I want to thank everybody for watching. Thank you for watching. And I want to say a special thanks to our Patreons. You guys are amazing. And if you haven't, please like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video.